replace them. If something happens, you can go to a mechanic. You have one body. I think it's time that we start knowing our body at least as well as we know our car. And this is the reason why I made this talk a bit more about how the body works, rather than just some of those tips that you can get on the internet. Do these 5 things and these things are going to happen, but without knowing why. So we'll try to see how things work in the body when you're fasting. And I like to present with the slides. I'm just going to come in the front. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what happens. It's not working? On the screen, it's not going to happen. So what happens to the body when we fast? Okay. And then how fasting affects health conditions that we talked, like blood pressure, diabetes, and cholesterol. And I want you to learn like the mechanism behind it. And I made it in a very simple way. And then some of the other health benefits that have been proven for fasting, and some practical tips that we can take to fast better when it comes to its physical sense. I'm not talking about the spiritual sense right now. So of course, there's a disclaimer. This presentation is just for general health purposes. It doesn't replace, professional medical advice, nor diagnosis, nor treatment. I don't think I need to say it, but maybe I need to. So the analogy that can help us better understand how the body works, because I know that not everyone comes from a physiology background, comes from a medical background, various backgrounds. So I'm all been to a factory, different departments. It has a manufacturing department, it has a storage department, it has different workers. All of these departments, you have a control department, you have a waste department, you have many departments. Okay, all of the departments, they need workers, right? You have workers that work there, and all of them, those departments, they need energy. Without a power supply that goes through all these machines, your factory cannot work. All right. So in some ways, your body works like that. Okay. Each organ is like a department. Okay. It has a unique function, but it's complementary with the whole system. Okay. So each organ also needs workers. The workers in your body are your cells. And those cells, they have their job to do, and they need energy. And what do you think is the most preferred source of energy for these cells? Sorry? It's glucose. Okay? So when you eat, the fastest source available for those cells to work is glucose. Okay, which is what I put at the end. So now, what happens? Glucose, just like oxygen, is in our blood cells. It wants to go inside the cells of our muscles, for example, to contract. It's not happening just like that. When you eat, yes, glucose is broken down from your digestive tract. It goes in the blood. Glucose is in your blood. It still doesn't go in your cell. Can someone tell me why? Why glucose doesn't go in the cell, even if it's there? Because glucose cannot enter a cell without something, which is what? Which is insulin. Without insulin, the glucose cannot enter the cell, which is why you treat diabetes with what? With insulin. So the analogy is this. You want to go home, you're in front of your door. Even if this is your home, if you don't have the key, you cannot enter. And it doesn't matter how many people are outside the door. You have your whole family lined up. If you don't have the key, you cannot enter. Okay? So insulin, which is produced by the pancreas, it acts like a key. And it helps glucose get inside the cell, and then the cell can use the glucose. Without insulin, the glucose cannot enter. Okay? That's the key. So the analogy is that think of insulin as a key and the cell membrane as a locked door. Insulin is thus the key that lets the glucose enter into the house. So now what happens? When you eat, insulin spikes. When you eat, insulin spikes. You have glucose, insulin spikes. glucose gets into the cell. If you're constantly eating, it's as if you have the key that's constantly working. Insulin is always going inside the cell, opening up the door, glucose is going inside. Constantly, constantly, constantly. And what happens when you use a key inside a doorknob and you always use it all the time? What's going to happen? That key is going to get damaged. This is what we call insulin resistance. So then insulin is going to be there, but it's not working anymore. So it's like you have the key, but the cell becomes insulin resistant. It doesn't let the glucose enter because insulin is not working anymore. And this is the definition of diabetes type 2. So in diabetes type 2, your insulin is not working properly. That's why your glucose stays in the blood. It cannot go inside. And this is why also people get tired. There is blood, there is sugar in the blood. Sugar is there, but people feel tired because it cannot enter. So this is what actually happens. You have a lot of sugar that's accumulated just in the blood vessels, which is why in diabetes, if you check your blood level, your sugar is going to be high. It's not a matter of sugar not being there. It's that your insulin is not working to open up the key for the glucose to go inside. So that's why we need to treat with proper insulin. Now, another thing is, this is how the body works. When the glucose starts to rise inside the blood, it thinks that there is not enough insulin. And that's why the glucose is there. It doesn't know that insulin is not the problem. The problem is that it's not working on the cell. So it's going to produce even more insulin. And the problem is that insulin doesn't only work for sugar, it works for inflammation. So when your insulin goes up, you have inflammation inside the body. So diabetes doesn't just come with sugar problems, it comes with inflammatory problems as well, which is why people have joint pains also when they have diabetes. So it's not just one problem when it comes to insulin resistance. Now the question is, this was the case when I said when you constantly eat, right? Let's take another scenario. What happens if you stop eating? Which is the meaning of fasting, basically. Basically, I'm going to tell you what happens when you fast. So when you have no food, insulin level drops, because insulin is always produced whenever sugar enters the bloodstream, sends a signal to the pancreas that there is sugar. You need to produce insulin so that we can use this sugar. There's no insulin. When there is no insulin, our cells, they become more sensitive to insulin. They're like, you know what? We don't have enough insulin. We're going to try to change ourselves to become more, receptive to insulin, so that when insulin comes, we're ready to take it. So on the one hand, when you eat too much, your cell becomes resistant to insulin. But if you fast, it increases its efficiency to insulin. This is the effect of fasting. Okay, so fasting is, in one way, fasting is a treatment for diabetes, at least to prevent it. If you already have it, it's another issue. But if you don't have it, one of the best ways to prevent from having it, especially if there's history of diabetes in your family, is to fast, because it resets your insulin receptors so that they don't become resistant. So this is, for example, when you have insulin resistance, the key is not working. As soon as you fast, it's as if you're remaking that key. Now that key is working again. If you fast just a few days, it helps. It's not like you need to do that the whole year. Okay, so now, do you guys understand the big picture of how fasting is helping with insulin and diabetes? Okay, I talked about three things, right? I said diabetes. Now we're going to talk about blood pressure. So what's the relationship between fasting and blood pressure? So again, the main player is insulin. When you have insulin that drops, okay, it also sends a signal to our body that this person is not eating anymore. This person is not eating. Now, I told you sugar is the most appreciated source of energy. So now the body is like, okay, there's no sugar. But our body has mechanisms to prevent stopping working its function in case there is starvation. This is why your liver comes in. So your liver has a storage of fat, okay, and a store of glycogen, which is some kind. It's a form of sugar. It releases that so that you can continue functioning. And one of the things that it does also is that it sends signal to use your fat storage. We have fat storage basically for us to be able to continue in case we don't have food. This is the main function of a fat storage. So when you fast, what happens? You reduce fat tissue. Okay? What happens when you reduce fat tissue? You have weight loss, right? Technically, if you fast properly, I'm not going to say what improperly mean, but if you fast properly, you go in a caloric deficit, you should lose weight. If you lose weight, okay, there's less pressure on the heart. The analogy I want you to use is that the heart is like an engine. If you have an engine for a Yaris, but now you're driving a truck, that engine is going to suffer, right? That's like blood pressure for you. So now from the truck, if you slim back to a Yaris, that engine is going to be happy. So when you're fasting, a Toyota Yaris is a small car, by the way, for those who don't know. So weight loss is one of the mechanisms behind which fasting improves blood pressure. Now cholesterol. How does that work? So I said when we eat, insulin is released, right? When I said when we eat, insulin is released. And one of the things that I told you is this is a signal for the cells to let the glucose enter. I also told you that insulin helps with fat storage. Why? Because when you eat a lot, our body is amazing. When you eat a lot, it also says, you know what? It's like when you have a big paycheck. Okay, because I know there are some accountants in the room. You have a big paycheck, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to save some for tomorrow. So our body is like that. Our body saves some of that energy for tomorrow. Okay? So it stores those extra calories into fat in the liver. Now, what happens when you're fasting? You don't have that energy. So your liver now starts using that fat in order to use it as energy. And what happens? Your cholesterol level goes down because you have less fat in your body. Your good cholesterol will go up, but your bad cholesterol will go down. So with fasting, insulin helps you prevent diabetes, prevent blood pressure, and lower your cholesterol, which are three of the main problems that our community have after crossing the 50-year mark. Okay? And that's just embedded in our religion. And I can give you a challenge. You can go and try to find any natural method out there that has health benefit on your body, and I challenge you, you will not come with something better than fasting. And Maulana is here. I'm almost certain if you ask him that in the literature of spirituality, what's the one month, what's the one action that helps the most your spiritual health, Maulana will say it's actually Ramadan, it's fasting. That's like, I don't think that there is any coincidence with that. When you have one creator of both, it makes a lot of sense. So now the question is, who benefits the most from these effects? Okay, the people that benefit the most from these effects are people who have a tendency to have high blood pressure, people who have a tendency to have a high cholesterol, people who are pre-diabetic or have diabetes type 2, people who are overweight, and people who are have a risk of developing this condition. So basically, this works better for the people who needs it the most. This is really interesting. If you're young, if you're 18 years old, I'm not going to say don't do it, but it's not going to have the same impact as it's going to happen if you're 50-year-old, you're overweight, you have a high blood pressure, and you're pre-diabetic. This is going to help you a lot if you actually take these into account. And this brings me to the metabolic syndrome. Does anyone know what is the metabolic syndrome? Okay, the metabolic syndrome is a condition that was defined just a few years ago, where people, especially epidemiologists, they realized that there are some conditions that when put together increase your risk of mortality and cardiac arrest, your cardiovascular health. What are these things? Elevated blood sugar levels, a lower amount of good cholesterol, so if you don't have enough good cholesterol, a high blood pressure, a high level of bad cholesterol, and excess weight in the abdomen. There's actually a measure that you can do. If you're above a certain measure, that counts as a risk factor. And if you add them, there's 5 criteria. If you have just even 3, you have a higher, much higher risk of having a cardiac arrest, having heart problems, and having a shortened lifespan. This is very important. Why? Because statistically, people from the Indian subcontinent have a higher rate of metabolic syndrome. Okay? Now, what are the other health benefits of fasting? And some of them are amazing. They are really, really amazing. I'm not sure if you know what autophagy means. Autophagy is a principle that explains how a cell, which I said the cell that constitutes our body, they renew themselves. This was a discovery that led to a Nobel Prize. Okay, and how do our cells renew themselves? The best signal for a cell to renew itself is fasting. Can you imagine? So if you want a cell to live, if it wants to live faster, the best signal is to fast. Because studies have shown that when you fast, it stimulates autophagy, which is the cell's capacity to take out the components that are not working properly, to break them down, reuse them, and to then be more efficient and live longer. Okay? So fasting actually has been shown to increase longevity. One of the reasons why is because it declines the aging of cells. Okay? This is very, very interesting. Now, I also told you that insulin, it works on sugar, but it also works on inflammation. And inflammation is a big topic in our community also. Many people suffer from joint pain and many autoimmune disease and so on and so forth. Well, one of the main player of inflammation is insulin. If you can control your insulin level, you can control many of the inflammation markers in your body. Okay, so when you fast and you're at least for 10 or 12 hours, your insulin is reduced, then chances are that your pro-inflammatory markers, they're going to be reduced. It doesn't mean that it's going to be enough for you to have an effect that you can feel, but over time for sure. Another thing that has been proven, and you probably heard about that a few years ago, there was a big, it was a hot topic, the microbiome. The microbiome is, the definition of the microbiome is basically the bacteria that live inside your GI tract, in your intestines, that are always there. When we think of bacteria, we think of bacterial infection. But these are the bacteria that shouldn't be where they are. Okay, but some bacteria are always in your GI tract. These are those that actually help you digest some of the food that you have. So some of those bacteria they have a better role than others. They help in bodily function more than others. And how do you increase those that are better? The answer is fasting. Again, if you want to improve your basically gut brain, and I think there was a hadith from one of the imam that says that most of the diseases that we have, they actually start from the gut. Yeah. So one of the ways that you can do that is to fast. And of course, these nutrients, they affect your whole system because your energy is coming from here. So if you work here, you're affecting almost all organs. Then fasting also can help, and there's a disclaimer, this is not true for everyone, but in some people, it can help with having a more sustained level of energy. I don't know if you've already experienced that, but sometimes you eat, and depending on what you eat, you feel very tired after. Okay? But this is counterintuitive because food is supposed to give you energy. And sometimes you have some professionals even at the hospital that say, I'm not going to eat because then I'm going to be tired. The thing is that depending on what you eat, your blood sugar spikes, but then it drops as fast as it spikes. When you fast, your body has the capacity to not use sugar as its main source of energy. It uses ketones. That's another talk, but that source of energy usually doesn't fluctuate as much as blood sugar. So what ends up happening is that your energy level is not more, but is more constant. And some people experience then more focus, mental clarity, and less crash in their energy. And this is not true for everyone. I think it happens for people who fast in a good way. And also, this effect usually takes time, in the sense that if you are not used to fasting, at the beginning you're going to be tired. It's like when you start Ramadan. The first few days you're tired, but after that you'll realize that after a few days, you can even skip suhoor and it doesn't have that much impact. I don't know if you've realized that. So now, one of the things so this was the physiology part. I hope that it cleared some of the mechanisms behind how, fasting helps diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, and some of the other benefits of fasting. How much time do you have? Okay. 10 minutes? Okay. Zishan had asked me to think of few tips that can maybe help us achieve a better physical health during Ramadan, practical tips, okay? So one of the first things that I think is important, and I think it's from what I read in our hadith, is not recommended to skip suhoor. Okay. Yes. So don't skip suhoor. Myself included, sometimes sleep takes over. But one of the things that you should do is you should not skip suhoor. And if you can, okay, try to eat food that takes more time to digest. Because I said that when you ingest food, it's then metabolized into sugar. Sugar enters your bloodstream and then spikes the insulin. But the thing is that not every food that you eat is digested in the same way. And not every sugar is digested the same way. You have some fast, absorbed sugar, like white bread, like rice, like white pasta, or like gummies, like pure sugar. And you have what we call complex carbs. These are also sugars, but they take more time to be digested. So then what ends up happening is that the energy that is produced from digesting them is released throughout time, which is why it's important in the morning to eat more complex carbs, proteins, and not necessarily eat something that is easily digested, like rice or like white bread or very sugary things. These will give you a boost of energy, but they will crash at the same time. Here, for example, the energy levels for eating a croissant or white bread, for example, they're going to start at the same time, but they're going to crash much sooner. When you're eating something with protein or complex carbs, you can see that your energy levels, they're going to stay longer. So that's one way to help you have higher energy level for the longer time. Another thing is when you break your fast, and I think this is our problem. But I'm going to be polite because I think I'm included also in this. Try to remain human and break your fast gently. Because when you have a body that hasn't had food for a long time, when you eat that much sugar, that much carb, you are spiking your insulin level like crazy. Okay, but the problem is that your body has a certain capacity to absorb those sugar and to spike that insulin. It's gonna lead to your blood sugar remaining high for a long time because we don't have enough capacity to metabolize it. And then what happens if you have sugar for a long time in your blood and your liver senses it, is gonna make it into fat storage. So whatever in the day we said about fat being reduced and then it helps with blood pressure, everything's gonna be gone. Okay, So try not to overindulge, okay? Try to eat slowly, mindfully, have a balanced meal. The point is, you want to avoid the big insulin spike, okay? And I've been trying to use analogies, of the cars and the factories and stuff like that. So one of the analogies is like, think of your body like a car that you turn on after a few days. You cannot just turn it on and put your fifth gear and go on the highway like that. Give it time to warm up, Your body is a bit like that. It needs time. Try to also drink regularly between iftar and suhoor. Hydration is very important, especially for older generation. It puts a lot of pressure on the kidneys when you don't have enough water. Okay, so try to aim for water, not necessarily sugary drinks. For tonight, chai is okay, but other than that, try to drink water. And steady hydration works better. If you want to have a mental image, if you're thinking that I opened my fast and I drank a liter of water, that doesn't have the same impact as drinking 5 cups of water every an hour and a half. It's a bit like watering a plant. Imagine you go to East Africa, just to mention it like that, or to Pakistan or to India or wherever you are from, and you come back and you've missed 2 or 3 fed of water for your plant. You cannot just put 3 liters on a plant right now, even if it's dry. You're just gonna put enough for it to recover. You can put more the next day and then a couple of days later, but you cannot compensate like that just because you didn't have it. It's not like mathematics like that. So if, for example, we say your body needs 2 liters and you haven't had for 12 hours, don't drink 2 liters right away. Your body will not be able to handle it, and most of it you're just gonna release it in the bathroom. It's not gonna have the same impact as if you use it throughout the day or throughout the night in this case. And fruits can help for that, by the way. I wanted to, although it's not the topic of today, and I hope that at least one topic that I can suggest, if there's someone in the community that can talk about it, is try to think, not necessarily during Ramadan, but overall for your life. I've been very interested in this topic. It's very important for our community to prioritize physical activity, especially strength training. If there's one thing outside than fasting that you can remember from our talk, strength training for our community is very important. I've been working with some of the older generation in the geriatric ward. One of the main variables of health that predicts longevity, that predicts how well someone is going to age, is their lower limb muscle mass. People who have a lower limb body strength, they tend to have more aging problems. And especially in Montreal, because there's a lot of falls in Montreal. So when you do strength training, it's going to improve your joint stability, your joint strength, your bone strength, your muscle mass. And with age, one of the things that happens is that you lose muscle mass. But if you start with something that's above average, you're still going to retain enough muscle mass to be autonomous, to be able to walk, to be able to do your own things. Okay? This is very important. I'm not going to say that Ramadan is the time to hit the gym, but I'm saying it's not also the time that you should think of just sitting. If there's a way for you to be active, then do it. This is very important. Prioritize sleep and recovery. For sure, this is very important, because sleep is a mechanism through which a lot of the things happen in our body, especially when I said that fasting helps with cell repair. Do you realize that when you sleep, technically you're not supposed to eat? So when you're sleeping, you're fasting, which is why it's when you sleep that a lot of the cellular repairs, they happen in your body. Your brain renews a lot of the waste during your sleep. So that's one of the reasons why when you wake up after a very, very short sleep, you tend to be a different person. So yeah, so I think one of the key take-home message from a physical standpoint is that try to use Ramadan like a time off, but not like a time off that you're going on holidays and you're just, indulging in everything. This is the time off that you take in your year, the 2-3 weeks, and you know what, I'm going to do spring cleaning. I have repairs to do in my house. I have some renovations to do. So it has to be something that you have a goal. And that brings me in some ways to the analogy that if you have this goal in mind, then you should have already prepared for Ramadan. If you ask anyone here, next, for example, January, I'm moving into a new house. Or, we're already in January, but first week of February, I'm moving into a new house. Or first week of February, I have a renovation company that's happening to do renovation inside one of my room. Or I have to do X, Y, Z. You've already planned it. Because people are going to come in and they need the things to be ready. So even in spirituality, Ramadan needs to be prepared. So in terms of whatever you want to achieve, if you have those health issues and you want to work on it, there has to be some preparation. Don't just go there like that and not have any plan and realize after half of the Ramadan that I haven't changed my habit. I have been eating the same fried food and I basically lost this opportunity to work on my health, basically. So I think we're close to the end. The key message is, as I said, that if it's used wisely, Ramadan can help you with the 3 of the most important health conditions that we have in the community: diabetes, blood pressure, and cholesterol. And it can have a big impact on health. I think we can benefit from it, inshallah. Thank you. And if you have any questions or feedback, we can take them. Yes? Yeah. So it depends on the physical activity. If it's a walk, you can do it. If it's not a brisk walk, you can do it almost any time, because walking doesn't use that much calories. If you want to do something brisk, I would say the best is to do it, if you want to do it brisk with the intention of fat loss, do it before, when you're fasting, and just before, because you also need to drink. You don't want to be completely dehydrated. But there are studies that show that fasted cardio, for example, has a higher capacity to metabolize fat. Now, when you're doing strength training, it's a different story. Strength training, if you can, it's better to do it at least with some food, because you need that energy to lift, basically. Yeah. You can. The thing is that there's nothing that you can't do. Okay. I also want everyone here to I want this message to be clear. I personally don't think that Ramadan is the month to do strength training or to do cardio. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The most important benefits of Ramadan are the spiritual benefits. My point, my message is, like, we have heard a lot and not enough about the spiritual benefits. Let's just combine some of the physical benefits of fasting with those spiritual benefits. I mentioned strength training as a community as a whole, meaning that, for example, if you already are strength training, don't necessarily stop completely. Try to keep some. But if you want to start strength training, I wouldn't start doing Ramadan. You're already doing? I, for example, do strength training. I try to do it just before iftar or just after, because I need some food to be able to lift. But in my case, I do just enough to continue what I'm doing, but without losing too much time. Because the flip side of this coin is that the spiritual benefits of Ramadan are huge. So do enough that you continue your good habits, but don't lose on the feast of God. Because I believe that I'm not an alim for sure, but the more I'm studying about this, and then I read about the literature of all of our urafa have said, all of our ulama have said about Ramadan, that this is a gift from God. I'm thinking like this, that this gift is so huge so huge on our spirituality, on our ruh, that Allah is letting our cells benefit from this. Allah is letting our body benefit from this fragrance. So this, whatever I've told you about fasting, is just like a byproduct of that gift that Allah has for us. This is kind of the message that I want you to have, that let's just add our cells and our organs to benefit from the actual benefits that our soul is also getting. That light, it reaches our cell, Yes. Yes. Yes.
So in that particular case, what should be the seher and what should be a thought?
I cannot really answer this because ulcer peptides can have many reasons. Some of them are food related, some of them are H. pylori related, some of them are related to cigarettes, some of them, you have to see what's the issue, and I would suggest to just talk to your doctor. And also, not everyone that has the peptic issue reacts the same way. Some people, they have no problem with the fasting. Some people, if they fast and they eat certain food, then it aggravates the condition. Yeah, so there's no one answer for that. I would recommend that you talk to your... Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. So the principles that I mentioned are very broad. So one of the things that a person like that can do is you can keep your macronutrients protein heavy and complex carbs heavy while avoiding the triggers. Because in these situations, usually these people, they have some triggers. Yeah. So as long as you avoid those triggers and you switch to things that are healthier, like for example, if eggs is not a trigger, that has protein. If brown bread is not a trigger, it's a complex carb. If cheese is not a trigger, it has protein. Just switch to something healthier. Even that can help. Yes. Asthma usually has to do with lungs. So I haven't seen any studies like that, but maybe it can help. My pleasure.
It was really very nice. I think you gave us already the hint for the next program. We have the Raza for the accounting, but the physical will be coming after the Eid. So you gave us a very good hint.
Yes.
Strength training. Yeah, strength training. Yeah. So thank you, Jazakallah. And we are sorry if it take a little bit more time, but I'm sorry also for the ladies. If they have questions, they can send it, and we will ask the doctor, inshallah, to reply to it. And we will put it as a Q&A if he agrees on the announcement, so that everybody can benefit from that questions. Okay? Thank you, Jazakallah. And do the ziyarat. Oh no! Before ziyarat, we'll do a short